Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Inside the Pickle Jar. I'm Tanya, and today I'm going to vent a little bit. I am proudly wearing my Weird Girls Club shirt. I'm going to produce these and put these on my site, so if you want to have one as well, you can also be in the Weird Girls Club. I'm not going to be gentle with the system today. So if you're neurodivergent and you have ever sat in a performance review wondering what you did wrong, or if you've ever watched someone less qualified walk into a promotion that should have been yours, maybe if you've ever spent so much time and energy just seeming okay at work, but that by the time you got home, you had no energy left. This episode is for you. And if you're a manager, an HR professional, a team lead, or an employer who stumbled onto this podcast, I'm really glad you're here today. Stay, because this is for you too, even if it's uncomfortable, especially if it's uncomfortable. So let's go. I want to start with something that I think a lot of us in the neurodivergent community don't say out loud enough. Most of us spent years, sometimes decades, being told something was wrong with us before anyone told us what was actually going on. I was the kid who couldn't sit still, the teenager who was so smart but just not applying herself, the employee who was great at ideas but hard to manage. I definitely heard that one. And then there are the colleagues who I just rubbed people the wrong way, the one who was almost, but never quite. I have had jobs in the private sector, and it was really difficult for me to get promoted. So here's what nobody's telling you about growing up undiagnosed, as I did, and neurodivergent in a neurotypical world. You didn't just miss the diagnosis and didn't get one. You miss yourself. Because when the world keeps telling you that you're doing it wrong and you have no framework to understand why you process things differently, you start to believe them. And you start to believe that you are the problem. You are not the problem. You were never the problem. You were a person with a different kind of brain, living in a world that was built for a different kind of brain, with no map, no guide, and no one telling you the rules. Because the rules were invisible to everyone except the people who already knew them instinctively. That's not a personal failing. That is a systems failure. And I need us to name that clearly before we go any further, because everything I'm about to say builds on this foundation. The system was not built for us, and we have been blamed for struggling inside of it. I want to talk about something I'm going to call the masking tax. Now, if you're neurodivergent, you probably already know what I mean, even if you've never heard that exact phrase, but let me put words to it, because I think naming it matters. Masking is what happens when you spend your energy, not your actual work, but on performing neurotypically. You hear that word? Performing neurotypically. In an effort you spend making sure your eye contact looks right. I don't know about you, but I was always looking like right between the eyebrows so that it looked like I was looking at the right place. Making sure you didn't talk too fast or too slow or go too deep into your special interest when someone asks a casual question, or you get too technical when you're in a meeting and you go dive deep. You're always making sure that you respond to the email within what feels like a sociably acceptable window, making sure you look engaged in the meeting even when the fluorescent lights are making your brain feel like it's trying to process through static. That effort is real. It is cognitive labor. It is emotional labor. It is neurological labor. And most workplaces don't just ignore it. They require you to deliver all of that labor. They require you to perform neurotypically as a condition of being taken seriously, as a condition of being promotable, as a condition of belonging. And here's what makes me so frustrated that I could flip a table. Gently, because I'm kind of a lightweight and more of a Mr. Rogers style person, but the performance costs us everything. Studies on autistic adults show that sustained masking is directly linked to burnout, anxiety, depression, and even suicidal ideation. This is not a small thing. This is not just being professional. This is asking people to spend their most limited cognitive resource, executive function, working memory, social processing, on pretending instead of on their actual genius. And then those same workplaces turn around and say, she has so much potential, but she just doesn't seem to be performing at the level we'd expect. Of course she isn't. She's spending 40% of her bandwidth just getting through the door. So let me talk about managers. And I want to be fair here because I don't think most managers are malicious. I really don't. I do think most managers are undertrained, overworked, and operating with a mental model of good employee that was built in the 1950s and never updated. But good intentions don't protect people from harm. And right now, neurodivergent employees are being harmed quite consistently and in ways that were almost impossible to document or fight. Here's what it looks like. Your neurodivergent employee sends long emails. Detailed, thorough, sometimes tangential. Their manager reads this as disorganized, flags it as communication issues, notes it in the performance review, and in my case, sends me to leadership on paper not once, but twice. Your neurodivergent employee is quiet in meetings. They don't jump in. They wait. They process. And by the time they formulated their response, someone has moved on. Their manager reads this as disengaged, not a team player. What's actually happening, that brain needs time to process auditory information before producing verbal output. They're not disengaged. They're doing the most engaged thing possible, actually thinking before speaking. And in my case, I was always the person they hated inviting to meetings because I always asked too many questions. But to me, I was trying to get clarity and confirmation because I took things so literally that I wasn't always sure what was the actual business question I was trying to solve for. So your ND employee, neurodivergent employee, pushes back on a process that doesn't make sense and asks why, wants to understand the logic before they comply. Their manager reads this as attitude, resistance to feedback, difficult. What's actually happening, that person can't perform well inside of a system that they don't understand, because that's how we've always done it, is genuinely not enough information for a neurodivergent brain to work with. That's not defiance. That's how their brain is wired. And in every one of these scenarios, the neurodivergent employee gets the note in their review, gets passed over for the project, gets left off the invite list, gets quietly managed out. Not because they weren't good enough, because their manager didn't have the tools to see them clearly. And that right there is the missed promotion. That's the stagnated career. That's the person sitting across from me in a coaching session saying, I've worked so hard my whole life and I don't understand why I can't get ahead. And I have to sit with them in that because the answer is painful. It's not that you didn't work hard enough. It's that the game had rules you couldn't see, refereed by people who didn't know that they were enforcing them. And in my case, I was passed over a number of times, and it just ended up, I kind of gave up and just settled. And so I stopped asking. So now what? I have to ask or talk about what's happening right now in workplaces across this country. DEI programs. diversity, equity, inclusion, they were always imperfect. And I'm going to say that clearly. They were often performative. They were often focused on visible diversity while neurodivergent stayed invisible. They didn't go far enough and they didn't always reach the right people. But they were something. They were a signal that the organization was at least trying to ask the question, who are we leaving out and what can we do differently? And right now, those programs are being dismantled, if not dismantled already. Quietly in some places, loudly in others, framed as fairness, as meritocracy, as getting back to basics. And I need you to understand what that means for us. It means the already slim chance that your manager received any training on neurodivergence just got slimmer. It means the already rare accommodation conversation just got rarer. It means the invisible members of the diversity conversation, the neurodivergent folks, the late diagnosed adults, the people who've been masking so long they don't even know they're doing it anymore, just got more invisible. And the cruelty of this moment is the timing, because we are living through a late diagnosis wave. More adults than ever are finding out in their 30s, 40s, 50s, oh, that's why. That's why school felt impossible even when I studied harder than everyone else. That's why I've been fired 3 times and I still don't fully understand what I did wrong. That's why I go home exhausted from jobs that my colleagues seem to just float through. People are finding their answers and then looking up to find that the workplaces around them have even less patience than before. Less flexibility, less accommodation, less grace, and more pressure to perform, to produce, to be on constantly without friction. I don't say this to make you feel hopeless. I say it because I think we need to be clear-eyed about the world we're navigating. And I think the neurodivergent community specifically has been gaslit for so long into believing that if we just tried harder, just communicated better, just managed ourselves better, we'd be fine. We would not be fine. The system has a problem, and pretending otherwise is not kindness, it's complicity. So here we are. The system isn't perfect. The safety nets are shrinking. The patience is thinning. What do we do? First, I want to say this clearly, directly, and with everything I have. You deserved better. You deserve better. You deserved a manager who understood that your brain works differently and that different is not deficient. You deserved a workplace that measured your output instead of your optics. You deserved the promotion. You deserved the project. You deserved to be in the room. And the years you spent being labeled difficult, scattered, too much, too intense, too sensitive, not enough of whatever they needed you to be, those years were not wasted. They were hard, they were unfair, and they were not your fault. I need you to hear that. Not as a platitude, not as a motivational poster, as a fact. Now, here's what I also believe. Knowledge is power, but only if we use it. I'm going to say that again. Knowledge is power, but only if we use it. So here's what I want you to do. Not all at once, not perfectly, just start somewhere. Learn your own wiring. Understand your patterns. Know your triggers, your superpowers, your kryptonite. Not so that you can hide them better, but so you can advocate with yourself, for yourself, with clarity and confidence. Find your people, whether it's this community I'm creating for the neurodivergent, or maybe it's with a therapist or a coach. It could be me or another coach, a Discord server, a pen pal from a certain pickle jar. I might be dropping a hint about something I'm planning for the future. But find the people who get it. Because isolation is how the system keeps us small. Connection is how we get big. Name what's happening. When you're in a workplace situation that isn't working, try to name it. Not, I'm struggling, but I process information differently and I need X to do my best work. The more specific you can be, the harder it is to dismiss. And advocate, even when it's scary, even when you've been burned before. Because every time one of us names this clearly, every time one of us says out loud, this system is not built for my brain and here's what would actually help, we make it a little easier for the person behind us. We are not alone in this jar, and the jar is getting louder. So I want to close with something I say to every client I work with, and I mean it every single time. You were not too much. You were not too little. You were not broken, difficult, lazy, dramatic, or any of the other words that got written on your file somewhere along the way. You were a person with a different kind of brain, doing your absolute best in a world that never handed you the map. And you're still here. You found this podcast, or this podcast found you. And that means something. It means you haven't given up on understanding yourself. And I think that's one of the bravest things a person can do. One of my key values is personal development. And the fact that you're here with me means all the world to me. So if this episode hits something for you, I'd love to hear about it. Come find me on Instagram, or YouTube, or TikTok, or LinkedIn. Drop me a message, or write it in a letter and send it to the jar. Seriously, I read everything. And if you know someone, a friend, a colleague, a family member who needed to hear this today, please share it with them. Because the more people who understand what we're navigating, the better this world gets for all of us. So please like, subscribe, and share. And be gentle with yourself today, pickle friend. You're right where you belong, inside the pickle jar.